Good morning, I'm Raquel the Bell on the one and only WWNN 1470. Today in the studio we have Tracy from We Are the People. You can join her every Monday night from 7 to 7:30 p.m. on her website, WeAreThePeople.tv. Tracy tackles the student loan dilemma and offers viable options. And now, here's Tracy.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Marks, and you've joined WeAreThePeople.tv. Tonight's show is a replay of the first show Donald Cleveland and I did about his book, Revitalizing America, a Declaration Against Our Government. The reason, because we've been talking about Student Services Society, why we need it, and we have referred back to the book on several occasions, but mainly because I want you to know more in context about Donald L. Cleveland, who he is, what has motivated him to help found Student Services Society. I also want you to know what our government has done to our people, our very own military, civilians, and even our children, because this is what is going to put things in perspective for you. It will be glaringly obvious at this point in time our government can't be trusted to take care of our unemployment, much less our $1.16 trillion student loan debt. And although Donald's book isn't specifically about student loan debt, what it is about is how we have got to where we are now, as well as some ideas to work with at the end of the book to bring about that much needed change. It's a starting point, not ideas written in stone. But until that change is made, until we can put aside our differences and come together as one people to put our government back in line, we have a lot of people who are suffering and need of serious help right now. So stay tuned, and we'll be back live next week. Thank you for joining us. Hello, and welcome to We Are the People, Students for Liberty. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you for listening. And if you've been here before, you know that what we're all about is we talk about student loans, government welfare, corporate welfare, and the industries that surround them. Before we get started today, I'd just like to take a quick moment to remind you that Calypso from CalypsoSaltandSoap.com, who was on the show, she was one of our student loan stories. Remember her, she will be here for the Ren Fest. Amazing soaps, amazing goat's milks, creams, perfumes. Her sugar scrubs are to die for. And you can go ahead to her website, CalypsoSaltandSoap.com, and order up for the holidays. She's got some cute little things on special for Halloween. So when you get a chance, take a look, and then come see us at Rimfest when she gets there. Now, today I have with us a very special guest. Donald Cleveland is author of Revitalizing America, a Declaration Against Our Government. Donald has dual undergraduate degrees in political science and journalism, a graduate in policy planning and public opinion. He served in numerous public interest capacities, including president of a national governmental interest group, was involved in the evaluation of the Federal Intergovernmental Personnel Act, delegate to a federal regional council, a director of one of the country's largest public construction authorities, served as a legislative liaison to multiple state compact commissions, was assistant director of a state legislative research department, and headed a state governmental association. His legislative and lobbying experience covered a span of 13 years, during which time he wrote over 400 laws or amendments and 3 state constitutional amendments creating taxpayer savings. He was also instrumental in the initial funding of the Federal Rural Development Act. He has been active in numerous governmental and development groups and associations. He also served in Europe as captain in the U.S. Army during the Cold War. Thank you, Donald, for being here tonight. I'm just ecstatic to have you. Your book, wow. I couldn't put it down, literally. It made me cry in a couple of different places with the stories that you tell about the atrocities that we as a government have done to our own people. It's so sad, not to mention what we've done to others. So, you know, I know it sounds very naive, but when I went into school, I didn't realize that people could actually lie to me about something like that. Okay, and your book actually made me feel a little bit better because, you know, it's ingrained in us at a very early age through, you know, the Declaration of Independence, the Gettysburg Address, Preamble, Bill of Rights, the 14th Amendment. We think that we're protected, but yet we're not. So give us a little explanation on the historical basis and the general beliefs held by Americans about America.
Well, Tracy, I think that, first of all, I'm very happy to be here on your show. I appreciate that very much. I became interested in developing something in writing, producing a work that would actually start to define where the American people came from, what it is that we expect from our government, and how we can actually look toward our government to perform certain things that, as you point out, were sort of ingrained in us from our childhood. Things that we carried forward into our adult life and then finally realized in that process something's wrong here. And it's that realization of something that's wrong that asks you then to take a look at what was it that we were promised, and then how did our government either fulfill or fail to fulfill those promises. And then finally, unlike many authors who go out there and complain and complain and complain about something, as a result of my work in legislative history, I decided that I wasn't just going to be a complainer, that I wanted to provide something positive as a way to get us out of the situation. Regardless of how difficult it may seem, I wanted to provide something positive for the people to look at and say, you know, that's not a bad idea.
So you do think we can get out of this mess?
I think we can, but it's going to be something that will take the equivalent of another revolution. And I don't necessarily mean a violent revolution, but what I mean is it's a revolution in the way people feel, in the way that they look. That's right. And
a paradigm shift.
That's right. And in what they do. If you look back in our history, every major change in our history came during a time when there was unrest. And
absolutely.
That goes to the very first event in our history that formed us as a nation, and that was our revolution. And then we go through really sort of mini revolutions between then and the Civil War. But then the Civil War was a dramatic upheaval and revolution in our society. And then the next revolution came when the Civil Rights Movement started.
And there was a lot of violence revolved around that.
There was violence, but unfortunately, when you look at it, it wasn't violence from the side that wanted change. It was violence from the side that didn't want change. They wanted to preserve, as in the case of the Civil War, they wanted to preserve slavery. And in the case of the Civil Rights Movement, they didn't want to have the blacks or the Africans or the Mexicans, the people who were underclass in their mind, have the right to vote, have the right to be equal to the whites in society.
And they obviously still have a problem with that.
Many do. Many do.
When you read the blogs and the way they talk about Obama, I don't think any president has been subjected to that kind of harassment and just disrespect.
That's absolutely true. And so when I went through this whole process mentally, and it was after my wife and I suffered a series of events that called us to really make a judgment, ask the question, what's this society doing? What's this government doing? Why didn't this happen the right way? Why was there fraud in this case? Why didn't the court system work? Why didn't this work? And I think that it was because, in part, I have to say this, I was gullible. Right? I was gullible.
We are gullible in the beginning.
Yeah.
And especially if you believe in that. I mean, people quote the Declaration and the Constitution.
Right.
They quote this stuff all the time. But then now, as you say, it's not really law, is it?
No, it isn't. And let me just take us through this brief,
yes, please
brief
do.
thing. When you really look at it, I mean, this is something that we tell at home, but my oldest son used to sit on the pot when he came home from school, and he would sit on the pot singing the Star-Spangled Banner or reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, right? That's how deeply ingrained it is in our society. And when you look at it, I see that there are really about 5 myths that are promises that every person in the United States basically holds to. And those are really the Declaration of Independence, as you pointed out. It's Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. It's the preamble to the Constitution. It's the Bill of Rights and the first 10 amendments and the 14th Amendment, and then the Pledge of Allegiance. And that works out basically this way. When you look at the Declaration of Independence, it says that all men, first of all, excuse me, Tracy, that you're
No
not a man.
problem. I get that that's meant for both of us.
You get that it's meant for both of us. Well, but that tells you how ancient it was when the Declaration of Independence was written, that women didn't have the right to vote.
Only landowners could vote back then, too.
That's correct. So we didn't have the women, we only had the landowners. We didn't actually, and slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person.
I know, that's horrible.
Right. Then, and we actually accepted that. But in that promise, in the time that that promise was drawn, there were a couple of things going on. They did promise to give us certain unalienable rights, and included in those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, who wouldn't hold that out as something to accept?
Yeah,
Right?
that's where you think, oh, this is my country. They're not going to hurt me. They're trying to protect me.
That's right.
And that's ingrained from the time you're in kindergarten. Not so much nowadays, but back when I was going to school.
Well, it still is. It still is. While the modern people are a little bit more skeptical,
With good reason.
well, sure, of what these things are, it's still, when you stand up and sing the national anthem when you're about ready to play ball, all of these things flood into your head. It's just, it's a phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, and you can't get it, you can't avoid it. It does come back to you like that. And then you go to something like Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and a lot of people in America don't even know that the phrase, a government of, by, and for the people will not perish from this earth, that isn't written in any law document, that isn't anything, but it was merely
A speech.
a speech, Lincoln's speech, because that's the way he felt about the 50,000 lives that were sacrificed on the battlefield at Gettysburg. And then you come to the preamble of the Constitution, and a lot of us think that, well, the Constitution is a really nice thing, but there's something a lot of people don't realize, and that's that when the first Congress of the Confederation of the United States told the delegates that were established to adopt a Constitution, they said, we don't want you to change the whole document, we just want you to amend the Articles of Confederation. And so what happened is that the delegates to the Constitutional Convention locked themselves in a place and conducted their sessions secretly. No one knew what they were doing in drawing the new Constitution of the United States. It was a secret document.
Was that legal?
They didn't have open meeting laws in those days. All right?
So, yeah, well, I asked that for that. Yeah, so you could basically,
Get away with it.
yes.
But in the preamble to the Constitution, it's another thing where the preamble, the thing that says, hey, folks, this is what we're going to do with this grand design and this grand instrument, they use such phrases as the Constitution is going to be established to give you justice, to create domestic tranquility, to provide for common defense, and to promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty. All right? Now, I'll get back to some of this in a few seconds. But then we look at the Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights gave us these glorious 10 amendments. And you have to say that any group of people who would have adopted a constitution as it existed without the 10 amendments did not care a hoot for the average person, because it contained no guarantees, no rights whatsoever for the average citizen. It was focused strictly on establishing a government, period. And if it wouldn't have been for Jefferson demanding that there be some portion of individual rights within the Constitution, we wouldn't even have had the 10 amendments. And as a matter of fact, they were adopted about a year later after the Constitution was adopted. And then we come to the amendments to the Constitution, and the amendment, there were two amendments, the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, but the 14th Amendment, adopted after the end of the Civil War, was the amendment that was supposed to give us equal protection and due process under the law for all people.
Yeah, what happened to that?
Yeah, what happened to that?
Because I haven't seen that personally.
No.
I've actually been a victim of exactly the opposite,
Right.
So, I mean, I've been to these governmental institutions, and I've been a part of that process. My son hasn't been insured in 6 months, and he's supposed to be able to be sure. Well, it's getting close to a year, and I'm still fighting with them because they're saying, oh, you were supposed to send us this, and you didn't send us that, but I did. But it doesn't matter. I mean, I called the state attorney on the issue, but the fact of the matter was the deadline was missed by now, and of course I was kicked off the program. Still haven't been able to get back on because every time they say, oh, we need this, or you didn't send that, when I did and I have copies. So, but it's just a way to prolong the issue.
Well, there are a lot of things to consider about that, and I can touch on some of them briefly. But one of the reasons, to just answer a quick question, that the 14th Amendment didn't come to fruition when it was written into the Constitution is because Congress decided that when they drafted the 14th Amendment, they would put in the 5th paragraph of the amendment that constitutionally, the Congress had the right to enforce the provisions of the constitutional amendment. Now that's why you didn't have the Civil Liberties Acts passed, which really were directly part of the rights given in the 14th Amendment, until 100 years after the 14th Amendment was passed, because Congress had the right to enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment. What a joke.
It sure does change it, right? But I never realized that until I read your book.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of very subtle wording that takes the power out of what these laws and amendments have been, that were originally meant to be.
Right.
So you want to elaborate on that a
Because,
little
well,
bit?
we believe in the myth, right?
Well, yeah.
And
we've been trained to believe in the myth.
Right, and the last sort of myth that I used as a basis for writing my book and conducting these investigations into what had really happened to us was the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, there are a lot of things in the Pledge of Allegiance that I can sort of be affronted by, but the one that I am the most affronted by is the fact that it says we are one nation, and we are not one nation. When you look at how the laws are administered in this country, you have to realize that we are a federal government. A federal government means that certain powers are given to a central portion of the government, and as the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says, other parts of the government are reserved to the states. And as a result of that, when you look at business type of regulation or business laws, you find that instead of having one nation, we have 50 different nations.
Homestead laws as well.
Absolutely. And one of them that really takes the cake is when you look at how a government can take away a person's property if they don't pay their taxes. In some states, the property can't be taken away until 7 years have passed after not paying your taxes on your property. In other states, only 90 days. So if we go back to the words of due process and equal protection, how does that? Yeah, it doesn't happen.
But people are so afraid of big government. When you start talking about centralizing these certain laws, they freak out. But I don't think it's so much, you need the people to work. What you don't need is to give them more power. And basically what power they've had, it feels like they've given away to the corporations now anyway. I think it feels like the corporations run the government.
Well, it's been that way. It's been moving in that direction for a long time. And it's really surprising that after, such a man as Dwight Eisenhower was, such a glorious general, winning for our side, the World War II, and then becoming the President of the United States, when he warned about the military-industrial complex, nobody listened to him. We have the biggest military-industrial complex of any nation in the world right now, and it set the pathway for big corporations to become major influences in the way that our lives are run.
And he spoke out against that.
Yes, he did.
And he was a Republican. I'd just like to point out, okay? So there's a lot of Republicans that point out a lot of things in the Republican Party. Democrats are no saints.
That's right.
But so unalienable rights. I always read it as inalienable rights. Is there a difference?
No, not really.
Okay.
It was the art of the language at the time.
At the time, yes.
Yeah.
It was much more poetic. So let's talk about these inalienable rights. At the very least, that you think the government's not going to do anything against you, but in reading your book, I find the government's doing a lot against us. And in particular, I'd like you to talk about that young man.
Well, let me...
That made me cry.
Well...
It was just, man.
The one thing that, because I'm an ex-serviceman, and I believed in our national cause, I believed that we did things that were right at one time. what that caused me to do is to take a look at some of the things that we did to other people and how we did them. And I started out my evaluation of this process by saying that at the end of World War II, when we were trying the Nazis and we were trying the Japanese, one of the criteria one of the major criteria we had was the Nuremberg Code. And in the Nuremberg Code, one of the provisions that we used to execute the Nazis was that, hey, you cannot conduct medical experiments on any person without their full informed knowledge and consent. And yet when I look back in what we were doing during the time...
During the very same time.
During the same time, during World War II...
No wonder people look at us like
now, and after.
God.
And after. One of the things that really struck me, was something called the Tuskegee experiments. And the Tuskegee experiments was a deliberate policy that was set out where the United States Department of Health and certain county medical societies and the county governments and the state government of Alabama were actually allowing black men who came into the doctor's offices, not treatment centers or not clinics that were established by the public, but even private doctors' offices. If they had syphilis, the decision was made that they were to be given just a placebo rather than any form of antibiotic to stop the ravages of this syphilis. Why? And because they wanted to find out how far the disease would go, what it would do to people if the disease would run its natural course. And who did they pick to do this?
The people that can't defend themselves.
The people that can't defend themselves, the blacks. And this experimentation went on from 1932 until 1972.
Oh, dear God.
And it was only exposed because a reporter from the New York Times, who happened to be the son of a Jewish and Catholic immigrant who escaped the tragedy of World War II and the Holocaust, came to the United States, and he had listened to what they were saying about these tragedies and went off to investigate these Tuskegee experiments and expose the whole thing to the public. But no one was ever prosecuted. These were definitely crimes that were manslaughter. These were crimes that were murder. And because they were a deliberate and willful action taken by the government against the people of the United States, be they black, white, or orange, and no one had anything happen to them. And then we go on to the radiation experience.
Those were horrible.
Horrible. Unbelievable. I mean, you were talking about this little boy. Well, this little boy had cancer.
Leukemia, was it? Yeah, that broke my heart.
And they tried to find, his parents tried to find a cure for him. So among other things, they went to an organization called NASA. Right?
Okay.
All right.
Our government, the people that are protecting us.
That's right. And they said, well, we believe we have a cure for him. Well, go ahead and give him the treatment. What's the treatment? Well, they didn't tell them what the treatment was. So they exposed this poor child without full informed knowledge or consent of the parents to enough radiation that was 300 times the standard dosage, and the kid died.
Dear God, of course he died.
Right. So
I mean, there's no way you can use radiation and really come out. What was their purpose for this?
It was experimentation, because they were trying to find out what the maximum dosage was that you could give a person without them dying. They didn't tell the parents that, right?
They told them they were going to, it was a great treatment, you know, okay.
Right.
All right, so the whole thing with the banks and all, this doesn't sound so far-fetched if our government can do this. And how would you feel if your child was the one that this happened to and they didn't tell?
Right, yeah.
So how long did it take for them to find these things out? I mean, has this been released at a, I mean, I know you obviously have great research. If you read the book, you know, you'll see that, and you'll be able to find it.
Well, Tracy, the thing of it is that all of this came out over a period of time. It was like the New York Times reporter who dug out the problems in relation to the Tuskegee experiment.
And they dribble, and then you never put it all together.
And then people suddenly decide, hey, this is connected to this is connected to that, and we're going to put it together. And it's the radiation experiments go on beyond that. There was a private contractor, Bechtel, working for the United States government at the Hanford nuclear site. And what they did was they released radioactive iodine onto the population in the area of the Hanford nuclear site It covered at least 20 or 30 miles in radius. They released radioactive iodine on the population. And it went
Knowingly.
Knowingly. Why? Because they wanted to find out what the effect of radiation was on the people.
And how far it would spread, and
Right.
if
right,
it got worse or
right,
better, was it,
right.
oh,
They
Lord.
didn't tell anyone. These were secret experiments.
And then there was also with the military, the nose sprays for the
Yes.
children in the military.
Yeah, if you were a...
Was that radiation?
Yes, yes, it was a radioactive mist without the permission or the knowledge of the parents. When they took their children into a military
Now
dispensary.
I'm scared.
Yeah, right.
I wonder how much, because we were military brats,
Yeah. Well, Yeah. Well, they sprayed radioactive mist up the nose of the
Lovely.
children.
And did they die? Some of them?
There weren't. This is where you get into a problem. If you don't want people to know about what you've done to them, what do you do with the papers?
You lose them.
You lose them and you shred them.
Well, yeah, because you know what? They still can't find my records from me for the military.
Yeah, and that's what they did. They shredded the records. They actually shredded all the records so that there could be no evidence of the deviation or the deviant behavior that they had.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it goes on and on. I could deal with things like that, and I do in my book.
Yes, you have to read this book. If you're a history buff, if you're civics, if your kids are in civics, if you are, it's actually written in such a way that a layman can understand it. And then you do have where are these things, and you can go find this stuff. You've also got a website
Yes.
that you're putting together, right? They're going to put that website up there. It's revitalizeamericanow.com.
Yes, right.
It's not finished, but it's a beginning. We want to get into some things. We've got about 4 minutes left, 2 minutes left. Okay. So what else? Here we go. There's so many things. I need you to come back, and I need you to, break this out more. This is like an introductory. In the meantime, y'all should read the book. You've got to get it. I think you said you also on your website, they can get it for...
Yes. If you go to the website, revitalizeamericanow.org.
.org. Did I say .com?
That's
I'm
all
sorry.
right. Then you can actually buy the book from the publisher for reduction in price. Instead of $26, you pay $19 for it. And very soon it will be up in e-form as well, which will allow you to purchase it for $3.99.
Oh, great. And you said Kindle, though, had a version out, didn't you? Or
No,
is that...
but you can get it, you can order it through Barnes & Noble, and I think that may be...
Yeah, that's where I got it. I actually ordered the paper as opposed to the Kindle, but it's a small publisher, though, so they said, everybody, that's the way it goes now. You order it. So definitely go to the website, save that money, revitalizeamerica.now.org. And, so how do we fix this?
Yes, that's the big thing, Tracy. And we're in a state where, fortunately, we can start things in our own state through constitutional amendments. There are about 20-some states in the United States which allow referendums to be held by citizens' requests. And constitutional amendments have been made here in Florida before. And that's where we really need to start, because most of the major changes like the workers' compensation, child labor, and all of that came through state laws that were passed first. And so we need to start by doing something to adopt a human rights constitutional amendment for the people of the state of Florida and keep the ball rolling onto a national level.
And we're going to have you back, and we'll get more in depth about that. And even if I have to talk to you on the side and can't get you here right away, so we're gonna work on that. Is what we're going to do. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Have a great evening.
Looking for soul